Welcome in to Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace. Coming at you, it's Monday, May 4th. Star Wars Day? Dare I say it? Look at that. May the 4th be with you all listening to this podcast. Shout out the other Star Wars nerds like myself listening. That's a nice little surprise here. But we have a bunch of round one series that are now in the books that I need to talk about. If you guys missed it and are interested in my thoughts on the Celtics Sixers Game 7 from Saturday night, I did put out a podcast the other day with my guy RJ. Had a couple drinks in the system. So a very sloppy, sad podcast where two Celtics fans really just kind of sort through the chaos of what that round one series was against Philadelphia. So all my Celtics Sixers thoughts are there. We will do a little bit of a preview of round two as well. So I will talk a little bit of Sixers next at the tail end of this podcast. So stay tuned for that. But if you are looking for my Celtics thoughts, Celtics reactions, I mean, maybe I'll go off the rails at any given moment and just like vent more thoughts on the game. But definitely check out that last podcast if you're interested. But again, really awesome round one here. For casual fans out there, obviously Celtics fans like myself are still mourning, but the competitiveness of round one was a huge shock to me. I thought it was going to be pretty boring, pretty chalky. I thought things were going to get dialed up a notch in round two, which maybe they still will. But we had obviously 3 Game 7s in round one. I think there were moments of excitement in every single first round series, besides, I guess, maybe the Thunder Suns. That was a sweep and a non-competitive series through and through. But besides that, got to be happy with, if you're a casual NBA fan, even if your team didn't make the playoffs and you're just still watching these games like I am, lots to be excited about. So we're going to sort through all of it. Now, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this podcast because I know all these series are old news when we're talking about round one here, but we will cover thoughts on every single one of the series besides Celtics Sixers, and then we will give you guys some round two predictions at the end of this podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy. So let's move on to the most boring round one series, OKC versus Phoenix. This one was a sweep, like myself and many other people predicted. None of the games were close, but there are a few things worth calling out in the moments that I did see of this series. 34 points for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this series, including a 42-point performance in Game 3, where he shot 15 of 18 from the field. I just wanted to call out that I think, especially in the wake of the Denver series that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, I think Shai is the best player in the world. I think he has the belt. I think you could maybe have made an argument that he had that best player in the world belt as far back as last June when they won the title. I still felt like Jokic was best in the world basically all the way up through Christmas of this year. But some point in the second half of the season, Shai snatched the belt. Just his consistency, night in, night out. I do think he's a little bit better defender than Jokic as well. It's just been a really awesome run for him. And round one obviously wasn't a big challenge like what Jokic had to go up against, but he dominated Phoenix no matter who they threw at him. I know Phoenix had their own injury concerns that we'll talk about, but just wanted to call out really awesome Shai series in round one, despite the fact that it was not competitive at all. Now, Jalen Williams did look awesome in the couple games that he played in this series. I guess he really only played Game 1, and then he played a few moments of Game 2 before re-aggravating the same hamstring injury that kept him out during most of the regular season. So that is something to monitor with OKC. I don't know if they've really announced if he's going to play in Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals here, but that is something that we're going to have to monitor. And it just shows that, look, KC, they're not going to be at full strength here. I mean, that's kind of the nature of hamstring injuries. You saw it with Luka, obviously re-aggravating that hamstring injury at the end of the regular season. They're very finicky. And for a guy that plays as hard on both ends as Jalen Williams, that is something to monitor. Now, if there's any team that has the depth to offset that, it's OKC. I mean, they literally are too deep. It's probably a challenge for Mark Daigneault to figure out what guys he wants to work into the would you have guys that would be playing big minutes on other teams like Aaron Wiggins and maybe even like a Kenrich Williams that are regularly getting DNPs. So they obviously have the depth to work with that, but there have always been questions around who the number 2 guy on this OKC team is and should be if they were to make another deep playoff run, and the clubhouse favorite would be Jalen Williams. So it is a really big loss. And obviously they got a lot of rest with that Rockets-Lakers series going 6 games. So maybe Jalen Williams will be back as soon as Game 1 of round 2 here, but that is something worth monitoring. So a couple quick notes on Phoenix before we move on to the next series. It is worth noting that they had no Mark Williams the entire series, and they lost Jordan Goodwin in Game 1. So an already vastly outmatched Phoenix team was undermanned, which didn't make things any easier. I do think it was a really great Dillon Brooks series. I know nobody likes the guy. I know Shai talked some shit about him after the series and even featured him in a little Instagram post, which was pretty funny. I think those guys probably have some sort of relationship with the Canada connection there, but Dillon Brooks did average 26 per game and played pretty good defense in the few opportunities that he had guarding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But it did make me think when I was watching this series, like what the rest of Devin Booker's career is going to look like. Phoenix, all things told, had a really impressive season. Nobody even expected them to be in the playoffs, so it's not a shame that they were swept by OKC. That's clearly the best team in the league right now, but it just kind of feels like Devin Booker, that moment that he had in the 2021 finals, that might be the last time he gets to that stage. Now, you can say that about a lot of different guys, but I just wonder if his loyalty is going to fault him here, because I just don't really see a world in which the Suns get back to being competitive really anytime soon. I know they were a nice story this year, but they don't really have draft picks for the foreseeable future or any draft picks that are particularly valuable. So that's really going to hurt them, right? Like, they're going to be in a very similar position next year. And like, when does that get old? I wonder if Devin Booker would be open to exploring things with new teams, but he seems to be pretty happy being the face of the franchise. Wasn't his best series, but obviously OKC had an army of guys that could really cue in on him defensively. And it really could not be a much easier road for OKC. They played the worst team in all of the playoffs in either conference, in my opinion, in Phoenix, and they earned the easy road that they got by being the best team in basketball. Let's keep it pushing, move on to another series that's been over for a while now. We have Blazers versus Spurs. The Spurs won this one 4-1. There was a bit of drama with Victor Wembanyama suffering a concussion in Game 2. The Blazers immediately come back in that game and win their only game of the series behind a Scoot Henderson 30-piece, which was a pleasant surprise. I always kind of liked Scoot. Kind of gave up on him pretty early on in his NBA career when the jump shot wasn't coming along. He had some health concerns. Even like defensively, he looked to struggle more than what I expected, but it was a nice little moment from him. I can't say the rest of the series was great for Scoot. I think he even had like a scoreless game later on, so wasn't the best, but I do think that there were signs of life for anybody holding on to a lot of Scoot Henderson stock. Now, the Spurs went on to win in Game 3 without Victor Wembanyama. There was an awesome moment where Scoot Henderson was feeling himself. He taunts Dylan Harper, and Dylan Harper just goes apeshit, scores 22 of his 27 points in the second half. It was definitely his best game of his NBA career so far, especially given the stakes. I mean, he just looked unguardable, scoring at the rim. The three-point shot for Dylan Harper has been on the rise now for a while, and he's just the type of guy where he has so many more levels where he's going to get to in his career. It's just a matter of how much of that can he tap into during this playoff run, because San Antonio obviously has the ability to go all the way here. So Wemby ends up returning in Game 4 of the series. They basically roll over the Blazers the next two games, and De'Aaron Fox had a really nice game in Game 4. So that was nice to see. He had 28 points. I just wanted to call that out because I think there are a lot of people, Spurs fans, non-Spurs fans, just kind of calling out, like, what is De'Aaron Fox's role on this team? How useful is he really when you have performances like Dylan Harper in Game 3? You have Stephon Castle, who's just been their second best player all year long. But in a team that desperately lacks experience, I can't act like De'Aaron Fox has this long playoff resume, but the fact that he was in a playoff series, that he has been in this league a lot longer than most of his teammates, I think they are going to be very happy to have a guy like De'Aaron Fox and to have his level of experience in this postseason, and just having a guy that, look, I'd be pretty surprised if De'Aaron Fox is ever the best player on the court during a playoff game when everybody's healthy on both sides of that matchup, but can he be the best player for, the last 4 minutes of a game like we saw him do many times in Sacramento? I think he can. And so it's just nice to see him still get to that level for anybody taking the Spurs to win it all. Like they're kind of the team I'm rolling with now that the Celtics are out of the mix. So some Blazers thoughts for you before we move on to the next series. I absolutely loved what I saw from Rob Williams. He was the Blazers' best center in this series. Honestly, wasn't even close. It is very interesting that he is heading into unrestricted free agency after this season. So I think he just made himself a ton of money. I can't go as far as to saying like, hey, the Celtics need to be the first team lining up to sign him back. I'd love to see him back in Boston, but I'm not any more confident he's going to be able to survive or play 40 plus games in a regular season. That just seems out of the table for him. But he looked unbelievable in this series as a lob threat on defense, like really the best we've really ever seen from Rob Williams, especially in a playoff setting. So I love seeing that. Another former Celtic I got to show some love to is Drew Holiday. He was awesome in this series. He was the primary assignment on Wemby most of the time, which tells you everything you need to know about Drew Holiday. Just his IQ, how hard he works on the defensive end of the court can make up for the fact that he's literally a foot shorter than the guy he was guarding in that situation. Obviously, he had a couple tough offensive games, especially late in that series, and like the ultimate closeout game for the Spurs, he was pretty brutal, but we've seen the offense kind of come and go from Drew. But I think overall, Blazers fans should be vindicated by that trade to go out and trade for Drew Holiday despite his contract. I think I would go as far as to say that was like a win-win for the Celtics and Portland until the Celtics fucked it all up by trading Anthony Simons away for Vucevic, but that's another story for another day. Denny did predictably regress quite a bit in the playoffs. It wasn't as much of a cratering as I kind of expected with just kind of the way he played during the regular season and then having to go up against Victor Wembanyama in the playoffs. But I didn't want to rip him apart too much. I just wanted to say that he predictably struggled a bit against San Antonio. And again, signs of life from Scoot Henderson. So all things told, I was pretty happy with the Blazers relative to my expectations of that team. I mean, I guess besides Donovan Clingan, he was pretty useless for most of that series. He had some moments here and there, but again, he's one of those guys, I don't care how many threes he hits in the regular season. He's got a catapult ass jumper, terrible foot speed. Teams out there are not going to be scared of Donovan Clingan shooting in the playoffs. So he's going to have to make some leaps to get a little bit better and flesh that out a bit more. In general, there are some positive takeaways for the Blazers, and they have some draft capital to work with. Maybe they're a Giannis destination. We'll have to just see how this offseason goes for them. Next series I want to talk about here is Lakers versus Rockets, and what a roller coaster of a series it was. Starting off with game one, we get the news that after Kevin Durant played like 78 games in the regular season, that he was going to miss game one with a knee contusion. And then the Lakers immediately came out, dominated that game through and through. Then game two, Kevin Durant returns from his injury. Doesn't have the best game out there. I think he finished with like 8 or 9 turnovers in that one. Again, the Lakers roll, powered by LeBron James, and incredible performances from Marcus Smart. Game 3, the Lakers win that one as well. Now we have no Kevin Durant for games 3, 4, 5, and 6 because he had I believe, a left ankle injury and like a bone bruise as well. So he ended up missing the rest of the series. And every game he was questionable, so we didn't know exactly if and when he was going to come back. Turns out he never came back after game 2. So really tough luck for Kevin Durant. I do want to just start there and by saying that I did think it was odd that he was suddenly like healthy all season long and then suddenly missing those games. But I am kind of willing to give Kevin Durant the benefit of the doubt, because as much as you can question how much his teammates like and appreciate that guy and just kind of his resume over the past several years since leaving Golden State, I don't really think you can question how much that guy loves the game of basketball and that he's widely available and he's done his best to avoid major injuries throughout his career. So I don't want to say that he was just sitting out or kind of called it quits on his team. It was kind of weird that like the first couple games that he missed, he wasn't actually on the bench, but later on in the series, he was there supporting his teammates, even laughing with Reed Shepherd. And there were some funny tweets about that one as well when that clip was picked up by NBC or whoever. So pretty unfortunate injury luck. I do wonder if Kevin Durant swings that series. I can't say confidently. And it's certainly hard to feel bad for the Rockets when the Lakers were missing Austin Reeves for most of that series, missing Luka that entire series. So the injury edge still goes to the Lakers, and ultimately they were the better team. So I can't go that far, but I must admit it did cross my mind if Kevin Durant was playing in that game 6 that have gone the other way, and then suddenly we have a game 7 where anything can happen. Yeah, I think that was definitely on the table. But just quickly to go back to those first couple Lakers games, it might have been the best stretch that Marcus Smart has had in the playoffs. I mean, he had like 3 games where he had like 20 points, another 25-point game, back-to-back games with 5+ steals. It was like he turned back the hands of time. Pretty emotional for me as a Celtics fan. Like, I'm watching Luke Cornett play awesome for the Spurs. I'm watching Marcus for the Lakers. I'm watching Drew and Rob Williams for the Blazers. I mean, former Celtics all over the place were shining, especially early in this playoffs. Now, Marcus Smart did come back to earth a little bit, but luckily they were able to get some really awesome performances from Rui Hachimura down the stretch, being back in the starting lineup and getting a lot of shots. He played great. And ultimately, this was just a LeBron masterclass. I mean, he's gotten a lot of buzz, all of it positive since the playoffs started, and deservedly so, averaging a ton of assists, just in complete control of the Lakers offense, picking his spots on defense nicely. It was an unbelievable LeBron James series, and I think we should definitely appreciate round 1, because I think round 2 is going to be a whole lot harder. Give up LeBron all the credit in the world, because I didn't give the Lakers a real shot in this series with their injury concerns and just how outmatched they were athletically. On the other side of things, I mean, Reed Shepherd, tough series for him. He had some nice moments, including a really good stretch in game 5 where he hit a jumper, stole it from LeBron, and then basically sealed the game with a dunk. And so that was a nice moment where the Rockets did look like they were going to have a chance to come all the way back from down 3-0 in this series. But ultimately, he's just way too inefficient as a shooter, as a scorer to warrant the minutes that he was getting. And, Ime was yanking him in and out of the lineup all year long. And then suddenly he is somebody that they desperately needed to get some half-court offense going. And I just don't think he's ready for it. Maybe he'll get there, but being a small guard, he's not really the type of guy I'd want to bet on. So it was a pretty big up and down series from him. Jabari Smith had some nice moments. Ultimately, I think Ime Udoka probably should get fired. I do think we've seen enough with him as the Rockets head coach where their offense at the end of games, Kevin Durant or not out there, it was just unwatchable. Like your turn, my turn. Felt like they never really recovered from a Fred VanVleet injury that happened in October or something like that. Like, dude, that was a long time ago. I know it was a big loss, but it's Fred VanVleet. It's not like we're talking about like a prime Chris Paul, a Tyrese Halliburton, or somebody of that ilk. Like it's a nice player that's played in some big games, but he should not be the entire centerpiece of your offense that has Kevin Durant, that has Şengün, that has Amen Thompson, these other talented players. Now, obviously they're a flawed team because they have a couple non-shooters out there, namely Amen and Şengün, but this Rockets team was way more talented than Los Angeles, and they never figured it out. So really disappointing loss for the Rockets and a great win for the Lakers. And maybe they can make something shake with Luka coming back, but we'll talk about round 2 here in a bit. Next series here, we have Knicks versus Hawks. And man, it's unbelievable how much a series can change from game 1 going all the way to game 6. You have the Hawks coming out the gates, stealing game 1. CJ McCollum, unbelievable start to the series. He's being completely villainized in New York for how clutch he was at the end of these games. New York wins game 2, but the Hawks storm right back and win game 3. It looks like they have real momentum. There's a couple late game concerns and some moments where Jalen Brunson, a guy that's a perennial favorite or in the mix for clutch player of the year, has some really uncharacteristic turnovers and struggles to get off a good look against the Atlanta defense. And the Hawks have real momentum. And then, you fast forward a few games from the Hawks being up 2-1 to the absolute meltdown that we saw in game 6, where the Knicks just completely belt to ass the Hawks. It was truly the most uncompetitive playoff basketball game that I can remember. I guess last year I do remember game 1 of OKC against Memphis, I want to say. Like that one was like a 50-point game in like the second quarter as well. But I'm not sure it's ever gotten to like 50 or 60 points as quickly as what it did Knicks Hawks game 6. I was actually at a work event. I thought like my real app, like the score app I use, like was completely shit the bed. It was glitching out. Nope. Knicks are just up by 60. Meanwhile, the Celtics are struggling against the Sixers. Again, here we go, digressing back to my Celtics. Keeping it moving on the Hawks here, I do think it was an awesome series for Karl-Anthony Towns. He caused a lot of problem for Atlanta with his size, and he really leaned into his ability as a playmaker as well. He had a great number of assists throughout this series. OG Anunoby looked awesome. I know he closed the regular season really strong, but he feels to be at another level offensively than what we've ever seen him during his Knicks tenure. So that's going to be very exciting as a Knicks fan. Brunson did his thing, overcame some of those tough moments in games 1 and 3, and did his thing, finished this series averaging 26 points a game. And so the Knicks honestly should be pretty heavy favorites in the East. Maybe not heavy favorites, but just how wide open this conference has proven to be. But I'm really optimistic if I'm a Knicks fan right now. I think they're playing their best basketball at the right time, and they just look like a far superior team in games like 4, 5, and 6. A really strong close to that series. The Hawks, they had a nice run. The CJ McCollum story is awesome. They're actually going in the right direction now. They've moved on from Trae Young. They have an opportunity here to get really lucky with the Pelicans pick on lottery day, which is like less than a week away at this point. A lot of things to be excited about as a Hawks fan, but they were never really on the same tier as the Knicks, and I think the better team definitely took care of business in 6 games here. Moving on to the next series, we have arguably the most fascinating of all the round 1 matchups, Nuggets versus Timberwolves. And this is one that I had dog-eared on my playoff preview podcast. It's a series I was most looking forward to watching, and it certainly doesn't disappoint. We knew the Wolves were going to give the Nuggets a hard time, just like they have over the past couple of years. Every time that they've matched up in the regular season, in the postseason, it's been a challenge. But the Wolves really took it to a new level. And I do have to start off by telling the injury story of this matchup here. On the Denver side, they had no Peyton Watson the entire series. And I know that that's a guy that's not exactly a household name, despite the fact that Denver won the title a couple years ago. But Peyton Watson had a really awesome leap during the regular season, was definitely the Nuggets' best on-ball defender. Certainly without his absence, it turned into Christian Braun, and I think we all saw how that played out in this Nuggets-Timberwolves series. But Peyton Watson was a big loss and would have been huge to match up with some of the youth and athleticism the Timberwolves had to offer. So no Peyton Watson. Aaron Gordon was playing through a pretty significant calf injury. You could tell right away. Played in game 1. Played in game 2, sat out game 3 with the calf injury, returned in game 4 and just looked awful out there. And you could tell he was really laboring, really scared that that calf injury was going to be taken to the next level. And I think we all know what that injury looks like. So he did not end up playing beyond game 4. So another huge loss for the Nuggets. And on the Timberwolves side of things, I think the injury scale definitely tips in their favor. Tragically lose Dante DiVincenzo at the start of game 4 with an Achilles injury. Happened a minute into a game. You could see it right away. Really a massive bummer, especially for a guy that played in all 82 regular season games. He just showed up, gave it his all on both ends. So a massive loss for a Timberwolves team that wasn't necessarily known to be particularly deep at the guard position. Later that game, you have Anthony Edwards, who I should mention was not the best series for Ant. He was just 19 points per game, shot 36% from the field and just 26% from three. So he was working his way back from his own knee injury that kept him out for a huge chunk at the end of the regular season. That's the reason he wasn't eligible for first team All-NBA or any postseason awards. So you already knew Ant was at less than 100%. And then later on in that same game where they lose Dante DiVincenzo, he goes to the basket. He comes down very awkwardly, going full speed. All of his weight comes down on that knee that was bothering him, and he ends up being ruled out for the rest of the series. Now, it is worth noting that the Wolves and Spurs game is tipping off here in a little bit, and he is playing tonight, so that's awesome news. I have my own thoughts about how Anthony Edwards is going to recover and how healthy he'll be for this Spurs series, but needless to say, they only had Ant for about 3.5 games in this first-round series, and even in the games he played, it was not the same Anthony Edwards that we're accustomed to. So, injuries all around. In that same game where they lost Dante DiVincenzo, where they lost Anthony Edwards, ended up being easily the best game of the series, especially if you're a Timberwolves fan. It will be known as the Ayo Dosunmu game. Ayo finished the game with 43 points, including 5 of 5 from 3. Nuggets predictably took control of the momentum after those two injuries, and then Ayo snatched it right back and had a phenomenal close to that game. And he was a pretty massive pickup for the Timberwolves at the deadline. Everybody knew that he was a phenomenal addition, but I don't think anybody, and certainly not Chicago Bulls fans included, saw that performance from Ayo coming. It was an unbelievable moment, and suddenly the Timberwolves were pretty alive, being up 3-1 in the series. Now they end up losing Game 5 predictably, especially in the wake of all those injuries. But Game 6 ended up being a phenomenal game as well. I think this game will be known as like the Terrence Shannon Jr. game, or maybe the McDaniels closeout game. It was unbelievable. But basically right before Game 6, it's Ayo Dosunmu who gets ruled out as a late scratch. I believe he had a calf injury, something like that. So another tremendous loss for a Minnesota team that's already extremely undermanned. And the way that they were able to persevere, was Finch pulling all the right strings. They end up giving Terrence Shannon Jr. the start. Now, I hate to toot my own horn, but I got to say it, Terrence Shannon Jr. was probably my favorite bench player all year long. I mean, maybe not favorite bench player. That feels like a bit of a stretch, but favorite, like, under the radar guy on a relevant team. I just felt like I was so impressed with his athleticism, with his aggressiveness. Like, that guy just gets to the cup no matter what. He really hasn't come along as a shooter either. Kind of like a one-trick pony on offense, but he's so physical, so quick off the dribble, and he's a phenomenal athlete and finisher that he's just really fun to watch. And this was an awesome moment for him to capitalize on the fact that Denver was getting the shit beat out of them by Rudy Gobert and the defense of that Timberwolves team. You know, Jamal Murray's tired, Jokic is tired, and they just had no resistance at the rim really all series long. And Terrence Shannon Jr. was able to capitalize on that. I thought the best player, maybe on both sides of the ball, was Jaden McDaniels. He was phenomenal, guarding Jamal Murray for large stretches on one end and at the other, just giving buckets, hunting Jamal Murray. He called out Jamal Murray and the entire team for being terrible defenders early in the season, and he backed it up. A lot of clips going around reminding people that Jaden McDaniels was once one of the top-ranked high school players in the country. I think at one point he was ranked number 1. Kind of looked like a baby Kevin Durant out there in Game 6, just timely bucket after timely bucket. He finished the game with over 30 points, 25 points for Terrence Shannon Jr. Just a phenomenal game for Wolves fans out there, and really unleashing a 3 big lineup of Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, and then pushing Naz Reid to the 3, which is something that I've seen a few Timberwolves beat reporters clamoring for throughout the season. They finally let that fly in the final minutes of Game 6, and it was pretty spectacular. And the other two guys that they had on the court were, of course, Terrence Shannon Jr. and Jaden McDaniels, who's basically like 6'9", 6'10". So just this massive Minnesota lineup was giving Denver fits on both ends of the court, and they were just attacking smaller guys on the other end. Mike Conley with some kindly minutes as well. And ultimately, they close it out pretty comfortably in that Game 6 at home, and Timberwolves fans just have to be ecstatic. So let's talk about Denver here for a second. It was a pretty big nightmare Jokic series. It is kind of funny that even in a nightmare series for Jokic, he finishes with averages of 26 points, 13 rebounds, and 10 assists. That's kind of how it goes, but the turnovers were up quite a bit, 4 turnovers a game. He did just shoot 19% from 3, so the 3 ball was not falling all series long, and that greatly affected the way that Minnesota was able to defend Jokic and sag off him quite a bit. A phenomenal Rudy Gobert series as well, especially early on in that series. Some of those games the Timberwolves won, Rudy was just so good. I think one of them he literally finished the game, and I was so impressed watching Rudy Gobert, and I checked the box score, and he had 2 points and 7 rebounds, and that was kind of like his stat line. He obviously had a couple blocks as well, but I was like, man, that might have been like the most impactful 2-7 in NBA history, what Rudy Gobert did, just because he was able to just individually match up with Jokic without him hitting the three ball. And Jokic just didn't seem like it was as easy for him to solve that defense that the Timberwolves were throwing at him. So huge credit to Gobert for that. Jamal Murray had his moments during this series. He was 24 points per game, but again, it didn't come easy. He was just 26% from three and 35% from the field, had a bunch of turnovers as well. And you knew that life was going to be hard for Jamal Murray with how much youth that the Timberwolves have and how much ferocity they have on the defensive end of the court. Cam Johnson had a really nice game 6. There were signs of life there, but it was kind of too little too late at that point in the series. And I think the big problem for Denver was obviously the depth that made them so valuable, and which led me to pick this team to be my NBA champion before the season, which I'm still wrapping my mind around the fact that my favorite team and the team I picked to win it all before the season are both out in the first round. That's kind of nuts. But I felt so confident in this Denver team because last year when they took OKC to 7 games, it felt like they were a guy short. And I felt like the Michael Porter Jr. move and turning him into not just Cam Johnson, but effectively turning that into Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway Jr. and the return of Bruce Brown, like that made Denver really dangerous. And you combine that with the Peyton Watson leap. But here we are in the playoffs. Aaron Gordon is essential to making the Nuggets a somewhat decent defensive team. He's kind of the secret to that sauce. Peyton Watson, again, their best on-ball defender. Once you lose both of those guys, and then, to the Timberwolves' credit, they made guys like Tim Hardaway Jr. look pretty bad out there. Jonas Valanciunas was completely unplayable. Suddenly that depth that made Denver really dangerous and made them my pick was no longer a factor in the series. And again, it's not an excuse because Minnesota was much worse off, and I do think this was a pretty bad Jokic series, all things considered, but this team never really had a shot at it, with or without Aaron Gordon, because I think even if both teams are healthy, it just seems like the Timberwolves have the Nuggets number. And so it'll be really interesting to see if the Nuggets get drastic in the offseason, if they just kind of ride it out and try and re-sign Peyton Watson and bring their guys back. And maybe they have to move on from Cam Johnson, but if they keep the rest of the team in place, what does it look like? They're going to be a 50-plus win team if they have Jokic. They're going to be a threat to potentially go all the way, but it does feel like they are not on the same tier as an OKC or a San Antonio, like I thought that they were all year long. So now let's move on to the final 2 round 1 series here. We have a Paris series that ended up going 7 games. Let's talk about Raptors versus Cavs. Now, this one obviously ended in not so dramatic fashion yesterday after this series was neck and neck. The home team ended up winning every single game of this series. Obviously, Cleveland ended up closing it out in 7. And literally through 6.5 games, the series was a dead tie. Like literally both teams had scored the same number of points all the way through halftime of Game 7, which is pretty ridiculous. My immediate thoughts on this series were I was pretty disappointed that it took Cleveland that long to beat a Toronto team that wasn't that healthy. They didn't have Emmanuel quickly for the entirety of this series. I want to say that Brandon Ingram missed the last couple games of the series as well after having a pretty gross start to the series. But ultimately, I was pretty impressed with the Raptors. I thought that Scotty Barnes took a massive leap as a playmaker, as a scorer, as a shot creator. His mid-range jumper is coming along quite a bit. His ability to create his own shot off the bounce is impressive. And that offense from Toronto really didn't have much to work with. It was mostly Scotty Barnes tasked with figuring it out. Now, Cleveland is soft as baby shit defensively. That's my other big takeaway, but we'll get to the Cavs here in a second. But again, I was just really impressed with the way that Scotty Barnes was consistently able to create good looks for his team. I still don't really know what to do with RJ Barrett. If you guys missed it, he had a miraculous shot in Game 6 when they were down by 1 point. Scotty Barnes kicked it out to RJ Barrett with just 10 seconds left in the game. He shoots the 3, hits the back of the rim, literally goes 2 feet above the backboard and then straight down, coofs in, the crowd erupts, Toronto's going crazy, and then that ends up sending them to Game 7 after Cleveland didn't get a good look on the other end of the court. And so ultimately throughout the series, RJ Barrett was probably the Raptors' second best player. I just don't really know what to make of his game. It's hard for me to not be like a little disappointed just with what we all thought RJ Barrett was going to be coming out of Duke in that loaded class with Zion and Cam Reddish. So I guess he's better than Cam Reddish. He has that going for him. But I don't know. He's just kind of got a funky game to him. It did seem like Cleveland was hunting RJ Barrett the most out of any of the players that Toronto had on the court for most of the time to close games. So maybe that's worth noting. But in general, he had a pretty solid series. I think I was probably most impressed when we're talking about Toronto with Colin Murray-Boyles, the rookie. He was phenomenal in this series. He was their best center, despite him being only like 7'6'8", but he is like a brick shithouse. I mean, the dude's absolutely shredded. Maybe it's just because Jakob Poeltl is clearly a lemon and borderline unplayable at times, but man, Colin Murray-Boyles, the way he competed, he outplayed Mobley in a couple of those games early in the series. Now, ultimately, the story of Game 7 ended up being Jarrett Allen. Again, I said it was dead tied through halftime, and then the Cavs had a nice little run offensively to start the third quarter, and then Jarrett Allen just went apeshit for the rest of the third quarter. Finished with a double-double in the quarter. I want to say he had like 15 and 10 or something stupid like that just in the third quarter alone, that's the first time that's happened all season long. He was phenomenal in the game, and ultimately Colin Murray-Boyles was just giving up way too much size to keep Jarrett Allen off the glass, and he was pretty relentless in that one. So just wanted to call out that Colin Murray-Boyles, even though he came off the bench all series long, he was effectively their backup five and their better center throughout the series, and all of their best lineups have Colin Murray-Boyles in it. So the future is pretty bright in Toronto. They did impress me playing through those injuries. Now, the Cavs, it was pretty disappointing. It was kind of like a meh Donovan Mitchell series. It was a meh Harden series as well. I know people were monitoring his Game 7 stat line pretty closely, but I thought he was like just fine in the game. He wasn't a disaster by any means. But Cleveland is just so much more talented that I can't feel great about them going into round 2. And I think it's overall kind of embarrassing that it took the Cavs 7 games to beat an undermanned Raptors team. Finally, the last round 1 series we have to cover is Magic versus Pistons. And again, another roller coaster of a series. Obviously, this one ended up going 7 games with the Pistons coming out on top, but man, it was a long road to get there. The first couple games of the series, Orlando immediately comes out, punches Detroit in the mouth, gets a comfortable win. Detroit comes back, wins game 2, but then Orlando wins games 3 and 4, putting Orlando in a 1 series advantage. And at that point in the series, there was a pretty big shift. Franz Wagner was effectively ruled out for the rest of the series with a calf injury. He never played again after game 4. And ultimately, for an Orlando team that even when they were winning, even when they took that 3-1 series lead, I wouldn't say that the offense came easy, right? I mean, it was still a lot of Paolo, fantastic series from him, who we'll talk more about here in a second. But the offense for Orlando, it's never going to be good. They were still had the lowest offensive rating of any team in the playoffs. And when you lose a guy like Franz Wagner, that's maybe their second or third best player, depending on who you ask, that's a tremendous loss. And so that is a bummer news for Orlando. I do think that they had plenty of opportunities to close out the series and win, despite the fact that they lost one of their better players. Now, in Game 5, we had an instant classic. I think that was the most fun game of the entire series. Now, there was something endearing about the fact that it just was a complete and utter rock fight through the first 4 games. Really low scoring, teams not even sniffing 100 points, the usual stuff of what you'd expect between a Detroit-Orlando matchup with how hard points were to come by. But Game 5 was different. I mean, Paolo had it going early and often. Cade, same thing can be said for him. I want to say that they both finished with 45 points. They both set or tied playoff records for their respective franchises, which was awesome to see. Now, ultimately, Cade was just a little bit better than Paolo down the stretch in that game. Was able to create some easy points, and they were able to win Game 5. But the best opportunity for the Orlando Magic, bar none, was in Game 6. They had a 22-point halftime lead in another one of those games where points were at a premium, and they went on to just completely choke in the second half. They had 5 field goals in a second half of a game, 5 baskets in the second half of a playoff game. I don't know what the hell happened there, but that was kind of enough for me. Now, they came out early in Game 7, and Paolo was, again, phenomenal in Game 7. He was fantastic. He had it going early. Orlando had a nice little lead, but ultimately, Detroit came back. Cade ended up being probably the best player on the court, all things told, and Detroit completed the 3-1 comeback. Now, subsequently, Jamal Mosley, coach of the Orlando Magic, who was on the hot seat all year long, was immediately fired this morning, the day after Game 7. And I think I agree with that decision because, again, even when they were down Franz Wagner and whatnot, they should have been able to close out Detroit. They had arguably, of the top 6 players in the series, Orlando had at least 4 of them, maybe less than that once you have Franz Wagner out of the mix. But on paper, that's what they had. But that team just has too much talent to be as pathetic offensively as what they are. Like, I know guys like Magically, when they get into an Orlando Magic uniform, even if they're a good shooter on paper or whatever, things just don't work out. And they just are a team that has struggled from the outside and been below the league average in threes for like the better part of a decade now. But something's got to change. They had to have something schematically to create better looks for their team down the stretch. 5 field goals in the second half of an NBA playoff game is completely unacceptable. And I don't really feel that bad because, maybe somebody's like, hey, they went up 3-1 on the 1 seed. And like, that's kind of a tough break for a team that showed a lot of heart. No, I think Orlando was a dumpster fire for long enough offensively that we need to see Paolo Banchero with a new coach. We need to see the rest of this team under a new offensive system and see what it looks like. So Jamahl Mosley is gone. I do think some other Magic takes for you are that Paolo is a playoff riser. He's a franchise player. And I think anybody that's just overly critical of Paolo doesn't truly watch the games. And yes, that's like eating your vegetables, watching the Orlando Magic on offense at times. Like, I totally understand that. But that guy is just phenomenal. Like, he has it. Like, the physicality, the shots that he was taking, especially yesterday in that game 7, like those little, like, get a guy on your hip, bump, fade, mid-range jumper off the glass, like soft touch. They look like good shots. It's definitely difficult for him. He definitely needs to make the shot diet a little bit better. He's a little too reliant on the jump shot, but the jump shot looks good, man. And I'm telling you, at the end of these games, when everybody's tight and somebody just needs to make a tough shot, you want your 6'10" guy with a handle and strength to have the ability and the confidence to just bump a guy off of him and get to a shot and to be able to take and make tough shots. He doesn't need to make a living out of that 24/7, but that's also on his coach and his point guard and the rest of his teammates to make his life a little bit easier. But I just think we've seen it year over year now. I know the Magic have never actually won a playoff series with Paolo Banchero, but every year he's been in the playoffs, he's been phenomenal. And just to give you his averages for the series, he was 26 points per game. He was just 42% from the field and 33% from three. I understand that. The turnovers were at 3.4 a game. But again, I overall loved what I saw from Paolo Banchero. I loved what I saw in Game 5. Game 6 was a disaster for everybody across the board. And then Game 7, he balled out again with like 38 points or something like that. So I just want to give him credit. Desmond Bane, he's not my cup of tea. Kind of like the roided up T-Rex vibe that he's given off. The fact that he's supposed to be this like amazing 3-point shooter. And then the regular season, he hits like 2 threes a game. Again, maybe that reflects poorly on Jamahl Mosley. Maybe he could have stepped up a little bit more in the absence of Franz Wagner. I think that would have been nice to see for what they paid to get that guy. But it's hard for me, even as an anti-Desmond Bane guy, to put all that blame on him because that's a team that's been fucked up for a while. He largely did his thing. He had to deal with Ausar Thompson, who's just a menace defensively for most of that series. I was super disappointed in Jalen Suggs. I mean, horrible series for him. He used to be a guy that I thought was like essential to their offense. And now he's just like a chucker on that end of the court. I mean, he was pretty awful in this series, like games where he's going like 1 of 10 from the field and, 0 of 8 from 3, whatever that looks like. He finished this series shooting 24% from 3 and under 30% from the field. Like, yikes, man. And it didn't feel like he had the same edge defensively either. Now, maybe this just wasn't the series for him because the best player on the other team who he's accustomed to guarding was Cade Cunningham, and Cade is just simply too big for a guy in Jalen Suggs to stay in front of him, so he couldn't really have that assignment. But, man, I thought that was an awful Jalen Suggs series. And if we're going to criticize Paolo Banchero's shot diet, I think we need to, just take away 10 shots a game from Jalen Suggs right off the rip before we do anything like that. So Orlando has moves to make. I don't think it was all bad. Like, it is kind of commendable that they took a team that does have the best player in the series and did have a better team all year long to 7 games. But ultimately, they should have been able to close out Detroit because it felt like they had 4 of the 6 best players in the series for most of it, and they weren't able to capitalize on that. Some other quick Pistons thoughts. Incredible Ausar defense. It was awesome to find a way to work around the lack of jump shooting, the lack of free throw shooting, the lack of him just being able to put the ball in the basket. Doesn't seem to matter when you're an A++ athlete and you get some of the blocks and steals that Ausar Thompson does. Duren played decent in Game 7, but has had no standalone offense in the playoffs and had moments where he was just getting completely bitched by Wendell Carter Jr., and I have never been a fan of his game either. So that's my biggest concern heading into the Cleveland matchup is just the performance of Jalen Duren. It doesn't really feel like that's going to change anytime soon, and that was a massive reason why Detroit found themselves down 3-1. And then all in, it was just a phenomenal Cade Cunningham series. He averaged 32 points per game, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. He was at 6 turnovers a game as well. I mean, the turnovers were gross, especially in those games that the Pistons dropped. But the shooting efficiency was pretty great, 46 from the field, 40% from 3. He's just a big-time player, man. He continues to just leap guys on the best players in the league list. And the burden that he carried, 40-plus minutes a game, just weeks removed from a collapsed lung, is bonkers stuff, man. So any questions I had about Detroit Detroit and their reliance on Cade, like, I think that's accurate. I think NBA Twitter being like, hey, the Pistons can't shoot and they're very predictable and all of their offense comes from one guy. Like, all those NBA nerds were kind of right about the Pistons, and ultimately it didn't matter because Cade was just able to ultimately figure out the Orlando Magic in 7 games. So that's going to do it for the round 1 recap. I do quickly want to give you guys some round 2 predictions and go through all of the round 2 series here. We do have the Knicks and Sixers, which have already tipped off, and Timberwolves Spurs tipping off shortly. So I want to get this podcast wrapped up pretty soon. But Knicks versus Sixers, let's start there since that is the first series of round 2. Despite the fact that I'm still completely heartbroken by the result of Saturday's game, I have to admit that this is going to be an awesome series, a really fun TV product. Cat versus Embiid, they've had their battles over the years, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Maxey versus Jalen Brunson, I think that's going to be phenomenal to watch. Just a team that kind of line up really well. If I had to give my series prediction, I would say that Knicks are going to end up winning this one in 6 games. I think that they're the better team, and I just think that even if Joel Embiid and Paul George find a way to play at the same level offensively that what we just saw against Boston, I think the Knicks' depth is what is going to prevail in this series. I think that Mike Brown, if he has a brain, can learn from the mistakes of Joe Mazzulla in this one and not move away from this bench. Like, give guys like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like Jose Alvarado a few minutes to chase around Tyrese Maxey. Mitchell Robinson is going to be massive in this series because I think he is just so much better than any of the backup big men that the Sixers have to offer when Joel Embiid is not on the court, and I just think he's going to dominate the offensive glass. OJ Anunoby, if he can outplay Paul George in this series, which is kind of like a coin flip with how they both looked in round 1, that's going to give the Knicks a massive edge as well. And I just think that Philly's a bad health bet, right? I hate to say it, but I think we got the best version of Joel Embiid ever in a playoff series. Just happened to come against my Celtics. Pretty damn close to the same for Paul George as well. And so I do think the Knicks are going to end up winning this one in 6 games, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be some fun crowd moments, some good Garden moments, and casual fans should be pretty excited to watch that one. Next game we have tipping off shortly is Wolves versus Spurs. Another series that, again, I'm really excited about. I was hoping to have Denver, San Antonio. That's kind of what I had penciled in for this round, but this is a pretty good consolation prize, man. Anthony Edwards coming back. I am really nervous about what he's going to look like just because, again, he did not look like the same guy even in the games that he played in that round 1 series against the Nuggets. He was, again, only 18 points per game. And get ready to learn Stephon Castle, buddy. If you want to talk about a guy that can somewhat hang with Anthony Edwards athletically and is just going to have the energy and the effort to just be locked in, picking him up, making his life a living hell, that guy's Stephon Castle. So the fact that they do have a guy that on paper matches up well with Anthony Edwards as much as anybody makes me feel pretty confident about San Antonio in this one. On the other end of the court, I do think the Spurs will have a tough time scoring the ball on Minnesota, especially now that they've unlocked this 3 big lineup with Naz Reid at the 3. I think Chris Finch would be a fool to move away from that, especially with losing Dante DiVincenzo. Anthony Edwards is probably going to be playing less minutes. Like, they're going to have to get creative with how to fill those other minutes. And I think we will see that big lineup again. And Gobert, he is going to be able to make Wemby's life hard in moments. He's not going to be able to chase around Wemby all game, and he's going to be able to do stuff on the perimeter where maybe you don't want Gobert with the one on that assignment just because you're dragging him away from the hoop if Wemby's hitting threes. But ultimately, I just don't see the Wolves finding enough offense in this series to come out on top with a banged up Anthony Edwards and no Dante DiVincenzo. I hope we see more Terrence Shannon Jr. I hope we see the same level of offense that we saw in late series Jaden McDaniels. But I'm going to say Spurs in maybe 6 if I had to pick. If San Antonio is as good as I think they are, they shouldn't have a problem beating this banged up version of Minnesota. Pistons versus Cavs, next series we have to talk about here. You want to talk about a series I have no real feel. It's this one, man. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I have no idea. Again, I think the Cavs are just like tissue baby soft on defense. I think that was my big takeaway watching that Toronto series. And the Pistons just looked awful. Looked like every negative thing that every nerd on Twitter said about the Pistons all year long was kind of right. Like, Cade's the man. But what else? Now, I should mention, Tobias Harris had an unbelievable Game 7. I think he had 30 points. He had some really nice moments in Game 6 as well. So credit to him for being, honestly, the Pistons' second best offensive player. And then Dennis Jenkins had some really nice moments in Game 7 as well that ultimately gave the Pistons the spark they needed over the Magic. And so maybe that gives them a little bit of hope. Ultimately, I'm going to say Pistons in 7A because I don't really have a good feel. So I feel like 7 games is kind of like the cop-out when you truly don't know. But I will pick the Pistons because A, they have the best player in the series in Cade Cunningham. And B, I think that they kind of figured something out in those last 3 wins that they had consecutively against the Magic. It wasn't always pretty. They were in some pretty big deficits at times, but I think for a young team to like figure that out and win 3 straight games against an Orlando defense, again, Orlando defense, that's no joke. I think I have to give the Pistons some credit. So I am expecting the Pistons to win this one in 7 games. Some more maybe James Harden negative game 7 rhetoric coming our way. That game's also going to be played in Detroit, which helps my case as well. And then final series, we have to talk about Thunder versus Lakers. Now, Austin Reeves is back. It is worth calling out that he had a kind of rough game 5 when he first came back, but had some really nice moments in game 6. And ultimately, the Lakers are at a premium for players, right? Like they were depending heavily on Luke Kennard early in that round 1 series, who had some phenomenal moments, but it seems like that magic has worn out a little bit. I don't think he's going to be creating a lot of shots off the dribble moving forwards. We don't know when Luke is coming back. I'd expect to see him at some point, maybe like a game 3 or 4 he'll come back. I really don't know though, because if this goes the way I think it will, OKC is probably going to get up 2-0 in this series. I'd be pretty shocked if they didn't. And so I don't know if there's a real urgency to rush your franchise player back with a hamstring injury at that point. So it's hard to say, but ultimately this is just a truly horrible matchup for the Lakers. I mean, we saw what happened. There was some optimism after the trade deadline last year. Luka, LeBron, Reeves playing together. They get matched up with a frisky Minnesota team, and honestly, Ant and the Timberwolves just ran them out of the building. And I feel like stylistically, Minnesota and OKC are very similar with the athletes, with the defense that they play, the fact that they're very deep teams across the board. Nobody's deeper than OKC, though, and I just think that they are going to be hunting bad matchups from the defensive end left and right, hunting Austin Reeves, hunting LeBron, hunting Luke Kennard. I think they're going to get whatever they want. So out of respect for LeBron and Luka, I'll say OKC in 5. I'll say the Lakers steal 1. Maybe Luka comes back. He has a pretty good track record against Shea in the playoffs. And I'm hoping we get one more fun Luka Doncic game this season, but I'd be absolutely shocked if the Lakers win 2 or more games in this series. I don't think it's happening. And even giving OKC 1 loss in this series is honestly kind of a stretch. So that's going to do it for this podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and hopefully you forgive me for this one-man solo yap session where I covered 11 series across round 1 and round 2. So you'll have to forgive me for that. Again, I was sick last week, kind of missed that window to record when I was just out drinking Dayquil and watching games on my couch all weekend long. Really just did not feel like picking up a microphone and making you guys listen to me sounding like shit. So you'll have to forgive me for this being a bit backlogged here, but I think we got all of our thoughts out on round 1. I wasn't expecting much from round 1, and the product ended up being awesome. So I hope to be pleasantly surprised in round 2 as well. Like, I think Wolves versus Spurs is going to be really entertaining. Knicks versus Sixers, that's going to be fun. Pistons versus Cavs is a complete crapshoot. And the only series that I think is going to be particularly short that I feel confident about is Thunder versus Lakers. So this NBA product has been awesome, despite the fact that my Celtics are out. And clearly I don't know ball because the Nuggets, the team I picked to win the championship before the season, are out too. I'm still going to find a way to lock in and enjoy these games. So I hope you guys are doing the same. Be sure to follow @Words with Wallace on everything that includes Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, going to try to crank up the social media content here. So be sure you're following on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. Support the show there. And I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.